The tipping point, how little things can make a big difference, Malcolm Gladwell. The stickiness factor. What this means, though, is that children are going to have trouble with objects that have two names or objects that change names. A child have difficulty with, say, the idea that an oak is both an oak and a tree. He or she may well assume that in the case, tree is a word for collection of oaks. The idea then, the big bird no longer want to be called big bird, but instead want to be called Roy, is almost guaranteed to be puzzled the preschooler. How can someone with one name decide to have another name? Big Bird is saying that Big Bird is merely a descriptive name of the type of animal he is, and that he wants a particular name. He doesn't want to be a tree. He wants to be an oak. But 3 or 4-year-old don't understand that a tree can also be an oak. To the extent that they understand what's going on at all, they probably think that Big Bird is trying to change into something else, into some other kind of animal or some other collection of animal, and how could he do that? There's a deeper problem. Sesame Street is a magazine show. A typical show consists of at least 40 distinct segments, not more than about 3 minutes. 3 scenes with the actor and the Muppet, animation and short film from outside the studio. With shows like Roy in the late 1990s, the writer of the show attempted for the first time to link some of these pieces together with a common theme. The most of the show's story, though, the segments were entirely autonomous. In fact, new Sesame shows were constructed for the most part by mixing together pre-straight scene with animated beat and filmed sequence from the show's archives. The show's creator had a reason for wanting to construct Sesame Street this way. They thought preschoolers did not have the attention span to handle anything other than very short, tightly focused segment. We looked at the viewing pattern of young children and we found that they were watching Laugh In, says Lloyd Morissette, who was one of the show's founders, that had a very strong effect on the early Sesame Street. Jenny, relatively quick one-liner. The kids seemed to love it. Sesame Street creators were impressed even more by the power of television commercials. The 60s were the golden age of Madison Avenue, and at the time it seemed to make perfect sense that if a 60-second television spot could sell breakfast cereal to a 4-year-old, then it could also sell the children the alphabet. Part of the appeal of Jim Henson and Murphy to the show's creation, in fact, was that in the 1960s, Henson had some running a highly successful advertising shop. Many of the most famous Muppets were created for ad campaigns. Big Bird is really a variation of 70-foot dragon created by Henson for La Choy commercial. Cookie Monster was a feature man for Frito-Lay. Grover was used in promotional film for IBM. Henson's Murphy commercial from the 50s and 60s are hysterically funny but have a dark and ADP quality that, understandably, was absent from his Sesame Street work. I think the most significant format feature in a commercial is that about one thing, said Sam Gibson, one of the earliest Sesame Street producers. It's about selling one idea. The notion of breaking down the production of Sesame Street into units small enough so they could address a single educational goal like an individual letter owed a lot to the technique of commercials. But is the commercial theory of learning true? Daniel Anderson says that new research suggests that children actually don't like commercial as much as we saw they did because commercial don't tell stories, and stories have a particular salience and importance to young people. The original Sesame Street was an anti-narrative. It was by design unconnected collection of sketches. It wasn't just the ad that influenced by early Sesame Street. Anderson says there was also a theoretically perspective at the time, based in part one, the influential child psychologist Piaget, that a preschool child couldn't follow an extended narrative. Since the late 1960s, however, this idea has been turned on its head. 3 or 4 and 5 children may not be able to follow complicated plot and subplot, but the narrative form psychologists now believe is absolutely central to them. It's the only way to have the organizing the world of organized experiments. Jerome Bonner, a psychologist at New York University, said, they are not able to bring theory that organizes things in terms of cause and effect and relationship. So they turn things into stories, and when they try to make sense of their life, they use the stored version of their experience as the base for future reflection. If they don't catch something in a narrative structure, it doesn't get remembered very well, and it doesn't seem too accessible, the further kinds of mulling over. Bruno was involved in the early 1980s in the fascinating project called Narrative from the Crypt that was critical in changing the view of many child experts. The project centered on a two-year-old girl from New Haven called Emily, whose parents, both university professors, began to notice that before their daughter went to sleep at night, she talked to herself. Curious, they put a small microcassette record in his crib and several nights a week. For the next 15 moments, recorded both the conversational they had with Emily and they put her to bed and the conversation she had with herself before she fell asleep. The transcript, 122 in all, were then analyzed by a group of linguists and psychologists led by Catherine Lesson of Harvard University. What they found was that Emily's conversation with herself were more advanced than her conversation with her parent. In fact, they were significantly more advanced. One number of teams that met to discuss the Emily tapes, Carol Philman later wrote, in general, her speech to herself is so much richer and more complex than her speech to adults that it has made all of us, as a student of language development, begin to wonder whether the picture of language acquisition about the literature to date does not underrepresent the actual patterns of the linguistic knowledge of the young child. For once the lights are out and her parents leave the room, Emily reveals a stunning mastery of language form we would never have suspected from her everyday speech. Bellman was referring to things like vocabulary and grammar, and most important, the structure of Emily's monologues. She was making up stories, narratives that explained and organized the things that happened to her. Sometimes those stories were what linguists call temporal narrative. She would create a story to try to integrate event, action, and feeling into one structure, a process that's a critical part of a child's mental development. Here is a story Emily told herself at 32 months, which I'll quote at length to emphasize just how sophisticated children's speech is when they are by themselves. Tomorrow when you wake up from bed, first me and daddy and mommy, you eat breakfast like you usually do. And then we going to play and then soon daddy comes. Carl's going to come over and then we are going to play a little while. And then Carl and Emily are both going down the car with somebody and you are going to ride to nursery school. Whispered. And then when we get there, we are all going to get out of the car, go into the nursery school, and Dad is going to give us a kiss, then go and then say, and then we'll say goodbye, then he's going to walk, and you are going to play on nursery school. Don't that be funny? Because sometimes I go nursery school cause it's nursery school day. Sometimes I stay with Tella all week and sometimes I play mom and dad. But usually sometimes I am go to nursery school. But today I'm going to nursery school in the morning. In the morning, daddy in the van and usual you are going to eat breakfast like you usually do and then you are going to play. Then you are then the bells going to ring and here comes Carl in here and then Carl and then we are all going to play and then Emily is describing her Friday routine, but it's not a particular Friday. It's what she considers the ideal Friday, hypothetical Friday, in which everything she wants to happen happens. It's the Bono and Joel Carillo write in their commentary on the segment. A remarkable act of world making. She used toned emphasis, prolongation, a key word, and a kind of renouncement, remnants of the via del cinema verity. Your friend Carl particularly narrated through the door as we enter, as if to emphasize that she has everything done pat. She delivers the monologue in a rhythmic, almost sing-song way. And in the course of the soliloquy, she even feels free to comment on the loneliness of the course the events are taking. Won't that be funny? It's hard to look at this evidence of the importance of narrative and marveled at the success of Sesame Street. Here was the show that escaped and turned out to be the most important of all ways of reaching young children. It's also diluted its appeal to preschoolers with jokes and aimed only as an adult. Yet, it succeeded anyway. That was the genius of Sesame Street. And though the brilliance of its writing and the warmth and the charisma of the Muppet, it managed to overcome what might otherwise have been overwhelming obstacles. But it became easy to understand how you would make the children's show even stickier than Sesame Street. You'd make it perfectly literal, without any wordplay or comedy that would confuse preschoolers. And you'd teach kids how to think in the same way that kids teach themselves how to think, in the form of the story. You would make it, in other words, Blue's Clue.